Hi everybody, Marnie Tichenel here. I work for the Ohio State University for the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. I'm glad you decided to join me again for another bat video. I'm really excited about this video because, as you can see behind me, I am at the pond right behind my house. And I'm here tonight because I am hoping to listen in on some echolocation calls of bats. So more on how we do that in just a little bit. But for this video, we're also going to be talking about 5 ways that we can help bats. So remember that bats are really important parts of our living world. We really appreciate having them around because they eat so many different insects and they help to control insect populations. But let's talk for just a little bit about why bats might need our help. I'll see you back here in just a little bit.
Bats need our help because they are facing many threats. More than half of the bat species in the United States are suspected to be in decline, and several are already listed as endangered or threatened. Here in Ohio, all of our species are protected. So these losses are occurring at alarming rates around the world. Here in Ohio, our populations are being threatened by some of the ways that you're seeing right here. So colony disturbance starting, on the upper left side. That occurs when there is human disturbance to a place where a bat is maybe spending the winter or to a bat roost site, such as an incorrect eviction from a building. Wind energy is definitely a threat to our bat species. It is significantly impacting our migratory bats, like our red bats, our hoary bats, and our silver-haired bats, wherein those species are colliding with the wind turbines. And many of our species in Ohio are facing threats from disease, specifically white nose syndrome, which is caused by a non-native invasive fungus that is impacting bats when they are hibernating in caves and mines over the winter. So we have seen significant declines in several of our Ohio bat species due to that disease. And there are other factors as well. When you talk to wildlife rehabilitation centers, predation is one of the top reasons for bats needing care. But perhaps one of the biggest threats to our bats is habitat loss. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. What is habitat? Habitat is what an animal needs to survive. So what do bats need to survive? Well, they need the same things that we do: food, water, shelter, and space in which to find all of those other survival requirements. But would bats be happy eating pizza or mac and cheese, sleeping in a bed at night, drinking from a glass, and living in a house like we do? No, definitely not. So habitat is different for every animal. So a bat's habitat will be different from our habitat. So how do we learn what a bat's habitat is?
That's the fun part. We study bats to learn what they need to survive. Right now, there are bat biologists out there studying bats and how they're living their lives. The more we know about bats, the more we are able to help them when and if they need our help.
A biologist is a scientist who studies animals, plants, and other living organisms. So a bat biologist is someone who studies bats.
So how does a bat biologist study bats? There's lots of different ways, and we'll talk about them. But I just happen to have with me one way that bat biologists study bats. So this is called a bat detector, and I actually used this exact bat detector when I studied bats at the Ohio State University. Bat echolocation calls, or you could say it listens in on bat echolocation calls. So did you know that when a bat echolocates, that call is above our hearing range, above, right? So we can't hear it with our ears, which is why we need a piece of equipment like this to bring it down to our level. So I am out here tonight. It is about 10 after 8. Sunset is about 8:15 tonight. And right around that time, probably a little bit later than that, maybe 10 to 15 minutes later, I'm hoping to see some bats. I will have the bat detector turned on, and hopefully I can show you exactly how it works. Now, this is just one bat detector model. There's lots of other different types of bat detectors. So I'll show you another one really quickly. So here is another one. Now, this is just my iPad, right? The bat detector is actually this little guy right up here, okay? So not very big, definitely a lot smaller from this model, but different designs and different companies make these bat detectors. So we're going to take a closer look at how this little bat detector works. And I really like this one, especially when I'm teaching friends about bats, because as you can see, a whole lot of color just popped up here, right? And so we're going to take a little bit closer look at what all this means. But what this detector does is it is detecting those echolocation calls of bats, just like this one does, but it actually gives us a visual so we can see what those calls look like. So we're going to take a look at those calls as well.
Okay, I want to take a closer look at this detector so you know what you're looking at when we see bat calls coming in later. So I'm going to get it started. Now right away, you're seeing some color pop up. So what this detector does is it displays a spectrogram right here on the bottom and a waveform view. And basically this is giving us a visual of the bat echolocation calls. So from left to right, that's the time. Okay, so you see it moving as it's picking up my voice. And then from the top to the bottom here, that is frequency. So you can see that most of the frequency of my voice is very low. When we start to see bat calls, because they call at a higher frequency, remember we talked about bats echolocating at a level above our hearing. That means it's a higher frequency that they're echolocating at. So we're going to be seeing those bat calls coming up a little bit higher, kind of maybe around this area or so. Okay. So right now the screen is displaying any sounds that the detector right here is picking up. And then it also has an audio monitor. So I have it turned down now so it won't interfere with what I'm saying, but outside and next to the pond, you're going to be hearing some of those bat echolocation calls coming in as well. So what the detector does is it slows down those echolocation calls to a range and brings it down to a range that we can hear, just like I talked about with that other bat detector. So it'll take little tiny bits and pieces of the sounds and slow them down into something that our ears can pick up. So here we have a bat call. Now this is a call that I recorded at another time, but I just wanted to show you what it looks like. So when we're out by the pond and we start seeing those bat calls come in, you can easily recognize them. So this is the call from a big brown bat, and I would definitely expect for us to hear big brown bats tonight as well. But if you look at the little curves that you're seeing, each one of these, that is a bat echolocation call. Okay, and those are coming in right about a little under 30 as far as the frequency. But notice the shape. Okay, so looking at the shape of these different calls, the frequency at which they're coming in at, and that would be 30 kilohertz, and the duration. So how long those calls once they start and stop. By looking at all those different factors, that's how we determine what species is echolocating. And so this bat detector has an auto ID prediction, some prediction software. So it takes all of those things into account and it predicts what species is calling. So pretty cool, right? So, depending on how those calls look, we can identify different bat species just by looking at their echolocation calls. You can't really tell a difference by listening. All of the bat echolocation calls coming through the detector are going to sound kind of like some blips and bleeps. But by looking at the shape and the curvature and the frequency of those calls, that's how we can determine different species. So here I just wanted to show you a different species of call. Here we have a red bat. I'm just going to focus that just a little bit. And so maybe you're noticing right away some slight differences in the shape of those echolocation calls, but also notice the frequency. So I still have my little slider bar. You can't see it here, but it's at 30 kilohertz. But if I'm going to move it up a little bit because just to show you that this is a slightly higher frequency. So we're up to about 35, 37, and in some cases getting up closer to 40, which is right in the range of a red bat echolocation call. So just some slight differences there, and I just wanted to show you what a different species looked like.
So I am just waiting for dusk. When you're out studying bats, you learn to keep pretty late hours because if you remember, our bats are nocturnal. So I'm just going to be chilling out here for a little bit. I'll switch my camera view so you can see what I'm seeing. So here's our nice little pond, and I have both of my detectors set up, turned on, ready to go, and hopefully we will get some bats tonight. Stay tuned.
While we wait for the bats to show up, there are many other ways in which we study bats. So we count them as they exit their roost sites, whether that is a tree, a bat house, or a building. And so we call those roost site counts. We can also count those bats that hibernate in caves and mines during the winter. And those are called hibernacula count. So hibernacula, those are places where animals spend the winter. Now, a MistNet survey, well, let's start by explaining what a MistNet is. A MistNet is what you're seeing that little bat caught in the picture right there. So it's a very fine net that is used to capture birds and bats. This little bat was promptly removed upon capture and examined before it was let go. Radiotelemetry tracking is when bats are followed to determine where they spend their time, like where their preferred roost sites are. Radiotelemetry is how this hoary bat was found, sleeping among the leaves. Bats are first captured in a MistNet, and then a tracking device is temporarily fixed to them, and that tracking device then sends out a signal that the researchers can follow. Pretty cool, huh? So by studying bats, we learn their habitat and their needs. If you watched my last video, The Life of a Bat, then you learned that bats need insects to eat, water to drink, trees to roost in, and forests to live in. If you haven't yet, definitely check it out and learn all about bat habitats and what they're doing throughout the calendar year. Okay, let's check back and see if any bats have shown up yet on the detectors we have set up.
So here we have some really good calls coming in. I'm going to try to turn this up a little bit. Watch how they fly. There's another one. Oh, this is so great. I hope you all are enjoying this as much as I am. There he is. And I'm going to take it back down to my detector so you can see it's just going crazy with calls. So now I have my ID mode turned on, and you see that it popped up two options, the big brown bat. I think the other one was probably the silver-haired bat. Oh, nope, it was the yellow bat. So we don't have yellow bats here in Ohio. So it's likely the big brown bat, which is not unusual. Big brown bats, you will see them flying over all kinds of different areas, forested areas, residential areas, agricultural areas. They eat a lot of insects, lots of beetles. So they're great bats to have around. I definitely enjoy having them in our neighborhood for sure. Great calls there coming in. And it's gotten quite a bit darker now. I'm no longer seeing them flying above me, which is why a bat detector is so great, because again, we get to listen in on those calls. So there we go. Big brown bat and silver-haired bat, two species that we have here in Ohio. Their echolocation calls look very similar. So it's good that they're both popping up here, because sometimes you have to be careful identifying these calls. There it is, big brown again, silver-haired bat. Now this bat detector is saying that it's a big brown bat, and I would agree, just based on what those calls look like. Now it's saying a silver-haired bat, so I'd have to study those a little bit closer. Big browns are definitely more common than silver-haired bat, which is why I go first to the big brown. Look at all those calls. Lots of activity going on above me. I cannot see it because it's gotten darker, but boy, can we hear it.
In case you missed the bats flying in my video because they were a little hard to see, check out this video from Rachel Handy, who works at the Ohio Wildlife Center. Okay, while we wait for more bats to show up on our detectors, let's talk about 5 ways that we can help bats. Number 1, create habitat in woodlands. Woodlots and forested areas are great places for bats to fly in search of insects to eat. A diverse and healthy woodland offers a diverse and healthy insect population. Managed forests are okay too. So if there is a harvest going on that ends up creating gaps in the canopy or more open areas, that's okay. Certain species of bats like to hunt for insects in more open areas. Just be sure to leave plenty of possible roost trees behind. Do you remember what a roost tree is? Those are dead standing trees or live trees with cavities, or trees that have naturally peeling bark like shagbark hickory right there in the middle. You can see the little brown bat snuggled up right under the bark of this tree. Number 2, build a bat house, also known as a maternity roost house. Here is a video that I created that tells you a little bit more about bat houses. Let's check it out.
Now here we have a bat house. This is a 3-chambered bat house, and it can fit over 200 bats in it. And I just wanted to show you a few things about it. So first of all, a bat house is not like a bird house. It's not one big open area on the inside. I just mentioned that it's 3 chambers, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I lift it up, can you see inside? And you can see how there's 1, 2, 3 slots. Those are the chambers. And if a bat house is built correctly, there should be about 3/4 of an inch in between each one of those chambers. I'm going to give you a slightly different view. This is my box that I use to educate with. So normally the sides don't come off like that. But you see these little spacers in here in between each of these chambers, and those are there to make sure that these chambers stay the perfect width apart. So as you can see, house is on a pole, maybe out in an open area along the edge of the woods, or even next to a pond. Okay, one of the first things that bats do as they wake up at night is head to a source of water to get a drink. So there was a little bit closer look at our bat house. Let's talk about some other things that we can do to help bats.
For more information, plans, and guidance on bat houses, check out Bat Conservation International's Bat House site. And you can get to that by following that link right there at the bottom of your screen. So lots of great information. I highly encourage you to check it out if you have questions. And again, there are plans there if you feel the need or the desire to build your own bat house. Number 3, plant a bat garden. This might seem like an odd thing to do, especially as we don't have any nectar feeding bats that serve as pollinators here in Ohio. But what we do have are insect eating bats, and diverse plantings, especially those that use native plants, are great at attracting insects. So some of the things that you can do with your native plantings is to incorporate some late day or night blooming plants, plants that are scented during the night and that are pale in color. And the idea there would be to attract some of our night flying insects, moths, flies, and beetles. So some good examples might be evening primrose, blue vervain, phlox species, and wild 4 o'clocks. And remember, variety and diversity is key in any wildlife planting. Herbs are also great additions into your bat gardens, not only for the bats, but side note, they're great for pollinators. So our herbs attract a whole host of insects. So a great addition. Speaking of insects, let's check back in with our detectors.
So we have lots of activity going on above me, and notice right there, see that? How those calls got really close together? So that's what we call a feeding buzz, which is when the bat is echolocating very quickly, sending out a lot of calls very quickly to get a lot of information back. So we call it a feeding buzz because we think that the bat is getting closer to an insect, and so it's trying to get as much information back from those echolocation calls as it can so it can snatch that insect up.
Number 4, work with a professional to safely remove bat colonies from buildings. As we know, sometimes bat colonies share living spaces with us, and I certainly don't blame anyone who doesn't want to live with bats in their home. In this case, it's really important to work with a professional to make sure that those bats remain safe and there is no damage to the homeowner and to the home as well. So this is done by excluding the bat colony at the right time of year. So all the bats, both the mothers and the young, are safe. Exclusion allows the bats to exit and not re-enter the building. And so on that picture on the right, you see a little piece of screening that was placed over the entry and exit point of those bats. And so those bats can navigate down and fly out of that screen, but they can't quite figure out how to get back in. And of course, the exclusion device will be different depending on what that entrance and exit site looks like. But exclusion is the best long-term solution for the homeowner. Number 5, talk about bats. Yes, in my opinion, this is a great way to help bats, especially if you aren't able to do any of the other things that we've already talked about. The more people realize the importance of bats, the more they will help and support them. So special thanks to you for watching this talk. Give yourselves a pat on the back, and hopefully you learned some cool things about bats that you're excited to share with other people. And there are a lot of opportunities to learn more about bats, and so I'll share just a few with you. Did you know there was a National Bat Week? It occurs every year, October 24th through the 31st. And so you can visit that website in the middle of the screen for some really fun ways to learn more about bats. Now, here in Ohio, those of us who work with bats are also planning some Bat Week festivities, though it looks like most of them are still going to remain virtual for this year. But to find out about those events, check out the Ohio Bat Working Group website. The Ohio Bat Working Group is made up of folks working with bats in multiple ways, from those of us like myself that teach people about bats, to those that care for sick and injured bats, to those that are studying bats. So we get together to talk about bats, we share information on them, and we work together towards helping bats in Ohio. So we've recently created a new website to start sharing some of our efforts and Ohio resources. And so you can find that website at u.osu.edu/OBWG. Okay, let's do one last check-in to see what the bats are doing out by the pond.
So my camera can't focus, but they're actually flying right above me. You can kind of see me here. They're flying right above me, probably chowing down on some insects. And I know I've definitely have some flies and mosquitoes buzzing around me, so they're taking advantage of those insects. So I'm gonna wrap things up here and kind of sit back and enjoy the bats and listening to them. But I do hope you enjoyed sitting out here with me as we listened in on the conversation of bats. I'll see you next time. Bye.